Today I'll show you 5 different shots that you must learn how to do if you want to take your FPV game to the next level. Let's start straight away with shot number 1, which is the low flying shot. The low flying shot is one of my absolute favorites, and of course it's super impressive when done properly with an FPV drone. Of course you can kind of replicate a shot like this with a camera drone, but you simply lack that level of control, level of precision. You have a lot of latency between the drone and the remote controller, and of course you don't have FPV goggles when you're controlling your drone, so it's a lot harder to pull it off correctly with another drone, and of course you lack that specific FPV type of movement that FPV is far superior with when it comes to giving that dynamic feeling. So if you want to pull off this shot, you only need 2 things. First is amazing control over your drone, because obviously you will be flying very close to the ground, so if you go a little bit too close to the ground you might hit something. However, if you have good control and you know where your limit is and what is, you know, the safe distance between your drone and the ground, you can go really low, and the lower you get, the more impressive the shot is, because it demonstrates the speed of the drone in a very impressive way. The ground is just moving so quickly and everything kind of looks like a blur. And that leads me to my second point of the second thing you need to create an impressive low flying shot, and that is motion blur. The motion blur is absolutely essential for this type of shot, because you want to demonstrate that speed, and for that to happen you need motion blur. So obviously the best way to get motion blur is by locking your settings in manual mode, so you can have a complete control over how your settings and your exposure work for your shot. And because of that, you also need ND filters, so you can properly expose your shot. When you lock your ISO to 100, for example, and you lock your shutter speed to double your frame rate, you will end up with a very bright image. So to counter that, of course, you will need to put an ND filter. When you put your ND filter and you use manual camera settings and you have the proper exposure, you will notice an extreme amount of motion blur, and when I say an extreme amount, this is a good thing. You want to have a natural moving surface which creates a lot of motion blur. Obviously some people prefer to have a little bit less, so if you are one of them, you can lock your shutter speed to maybe not double your frame rate but 4 times your frame rate. Then you will end up with a lot less motion blur, so it's up to you. But for me, for the low flying shot, I prefer to have as much motion blur as possible, so I can really, you know, end up with a much more appealing, much more visually appealing and, you know, beautiful looking shot. The next type of shot also requires a lot of precision, but will make the jaws of your viewers completely drop if you pull it off correctly, and that is the go-through shot. Now this of course also requires a lot of precision from you, so practicing on the simulator or doing some test runs with bigger obstacles that have a larger gap, and then slowly but surely going through smaller and smaller gaps will make this a lot easier for you. So give yourself some time and practice a lot, because it's not as easy as it sounds, and you need to take into this consideration that sometimes when you approach a small gap, there are some wind gusts, there are some air currents that will push your drone to the left or to the right or in any other direction in the last possible moment. So you'll need to be prepared and you need to commit if you're going for it. Sometimes if you are confused and if you are not completely sure whether you will make it, chances are probably you won't make it, because you will be you won't commit to hitting the gap, and sometimes not committing is the worst thing that you can do, because you will most probably crash. The most important thing is to give yourself some time and find a good place to practice, so you can gradually make it harder for you and get that precision dialed in, because the more you practice, of course, the easier it will get and the more impressive your end shot will look like. The next technique is again very simple but looks absolutely stunning if you manage to pull it off properly, and that is the chasing shot. And what this really boils down to is to find an interesting object that you can follow and then simply use the control that you have with your FPV drone to keep it in the middle of your frame, or at least in any part of the frame, without ever losing it, so you can demonstrate what is going on, what the action really is, and make your shot really dynamic. The best objects to follow for FPV, in my opinion, are cars or people riding their bikes, their motorbikes, their bicycles, on a skateboard, a skier, snowboarder, any person that is doing some type of action sports. I believe this is where this technique really shines the most, because it's getting you closer to the action, demonstrating some small details that probably you won't be able to see with a regular drone that just follows someone by actively tracking them, for example. And you can really incorporate some dynamic into the shot by quickly switching the pace, by being slower, then going faster and closer to the object, maybe playing with the frame rate. If you are shooting in a higher frame rate, you can slow down to really demonstrate that action that is going on, just like I did with the motorbike in the intro of this video. And you have so many possibilities to pull this off and make an impressive looking shot. It's just great. Shot number 4 is flying freestyle or acro. This is a very vast term that of course can mean many things, but for me, flying freestyle is not, doing flips and rolls so your viewer gets dizzy. It's to incorporate the power of FPV into your shots so you can give more dynamic and give more sense of speed and action to your viewer. The best way to do that is by doing calculated and precise movements that really mean something. And a good example for that is, let's say, diving a waterfall, or dropping from a very high altitude, diving a building, or just following someone that is jumping, like a guy on a parachute or something like that. There are a lot of possibilities to do that, but this is kind of the next level. If you're just starting out, of course, this is not ideal, and that's something that you might want to first practice in the simulator for a lot of hours so you are sure that you can pull it off. But those shots are really impressive because no other drone besides FPV drones can really do that. And of course, it's great to take advantage of that type of movement that is impossible to achieve with a regular drone and incorporate that in your footage. And the last shot that I want to talk about today is the long range surfing type of shot that I think many people overlook and tend to underestimate a little bit, but I think it looks absolutely impressive if you're in the right environment. So maybe if you are in the mountains and you have a large forest, you have a lot of trees, you have a great looking landscape with lots of things going on, and you are flying a 7-inch or even the 5-inch drone is okay, as long as you have good signal and you can really push it to cover a large amount of distance, then nothing is more beautiful than incorporating that landscape into your footage and just passing through all of these objects and obstacles and just going around them similarly to a fighter jet, and doing it in a very precise but calm way without any major changes of the direction, just doing it very smoothly. That's the beauty of FPV, the fact that you can change the direction but do it very smoothly and calculate it. So especially if you have a good visibility and you can kind of plan your movement with the drone a little bit beforehand, it's even more impressive because that way you can start the movement a little bit earlier and just do it a little bit slower but also more smoother. That will just make sure that the viewer knows that you're not doing it by chance. You have calculated everything and you're really precise, you're super calculated with your movements, and you're doing it on purpose to really showcase that you have full control over your drone. And that's pretty much it for those 5 movements that I think, if done properly, can really wow your viewer and yourself, of course, as well, because nothing is more pleasant than knowing that you hit that gap, you hit that obstacle, or you didn't hit that obstacle, and you were able to pull off the shot that you had in your mind before even taking off. So I hope you found this video useful and informative. If you did, please do me a huge favor, blow up the like button, subscribe for more videos like this one. This is Mike from Drone Supremacy. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you in my next one. Ciao.